Hello, welcome everyone. Welcome to Winning at Tenders, Grants and Awards. Thank you so much for joining us today. It is not the normal way I present. I'd like to have a group of people in the room that I can actually look at and talk to, ask questions and communicate with. So there is an opportunity for you today. If you do have any questions, please feel free to shoot them through as we go through. I have my lovely team member Tracy helping me out today, and she's actually consolidating those questions. If we don't get to them, we'll come back to you after today's short webinar. So first of all, I just want to say I hope you're all coping with the new normal that we have happening at the moment. The good news is tenders don't stop. Good news, bad news. We still have to go out and win work in this environment that we're currently in. So it's super important, I think, today that we just refocus and remember what it is that we need to do to win when we are pitching for work, whether it be tenders, awards, or grants. So today there's lots of familiar faces, which I'm so happy about. There are about 40 of you on the webinar today. And we have a mixture of different people from different organisations, but some of you I've actually had the pleasure of working with on a tender, so welcome. Others, you've actually sat in on some training sessions with me, and there's some new faces today. So it was, it'd be great to see you in person, and hopefully we'll get that opportunity at some stage down the track. For those of you who I haven't met before, just a very brief bit about me. It's not why you're here, but I have been working with tendering now, marketing communications, looking at awards and grants for over 25 years. And yes, I know I only look like I'm about 30. I think in this current environment we're all living in, we're all looking older than we do normally. But look, I have had that pleasure, and I've also got the pleasure of wearing two hats in the business that I have, where I sometimes work on tenders, grants and awards, and others I'm sometimes working on marketing, communications and strategy, which is a really beautiful blend of skills. This today is the first of many webinars that we're going to produce. We just wanted to create little sound bites that people could listen to. You don't have to sit here and look at me. You can just put on your headphones and listen. They'll be 30 minutes long and they'll range in topics, so keep your eyes out for them. But some of the topics that are coming up are looking at things like, how do I write an executive summary? And how do I perfect that executive summary? What are the key ingredients for doing that? Another one is bid management, tender coordination. How is there a tool that I should be using? How do I do this better? So there are a lot of other topics coming up, because obviously I'm not going to cover everything in a half an hour today. This is just more of a refresh and an opportunity for us to all remember that this is all about putting together a sales pitch and how do you go about doing it. So thank you again for joining us, and let's get stuck into it. Let's hope that I know how to work technology today, because those of you who know me know I'm not great with technology. So, all right, let's get started. Today we've got a very small agenda and we're looking at a couple of things. When an application comes out, we need to know, what are we doing? What's required? How do we respond to this? And then once you know what it is that you've got to pull together, how do you actually structure it so that you're putting your best foot forward and that you're actually producing something that will win you the work? No one wants to be on the losing team. We all want to be on the winning team. And then just a couple of reminders, because we all fall into that trap, including myself, and I do practice what I preach, but having a tender due at midday today for us, there are things that I sometimes have to stop, take a breath and remind what I shouldn't be doing. So we've got to remind ourselves all the time. It doesn't matter how many years you've been doing these things. If sometimes we're in a bit of a hurry and things change outside of our control, we have to remember what to avoid and what must be included. So we're going to get stuck into this. I'm just going to have a quick glass of water. Good old hay fever up here in Queensland, so apologies if I start throughout this. All right, so what are you looking at? What is it that they're after? What is it that you have to produce and provide? Now, this is assuming that you've gone through a go, no-go process. And I can't stress enough, and one of our other webinars will be looking at this in a lot more detail, but I cannot stress enough that it's super important that you have a process in place where you actually look at whether you should even be applying for what it is that you're doing. It's a lot of time, it's a lot of money, it's a lot of effort, and then there's a lot of tears at the end when you don't get it. Irrespective of what it is, make sure you've got everyone committed to it. That's your number one rule. Once you're committed, you've got a document of some sort, and they are a variety of things that you receive. So you might have a massive tender document that, you know, goes on forever with contracts and all of this, you know, drawings and documentation. Or you may have something really simple and a little vague in these are the things we want, but there's not a lot of questions being asked. So you kind of have to work through what is it that they're actually looking for. And sometimes it can be really obvious, and I love when people put a lot of time into those documents that they provide to us to respond to. They have to remember that when they're giving it to us, it is something that if they've made it easy for us, it's going to be easier for them. But as we all know, that doesn't always happen. They too copy and paste, and there are questions that go in there that don't make a lot of sense at the time. So it's really important that we take a breath when we get these documents. And my number one rule is I read it 3 times. Don't care how long it is, I have to read it 3 times. I read it once to work out what it even is that I'm looking at. I read it a second time and I make sure that I've got all the bits that it's referring to. Happens quite often when these things are given to us, they miss a document that they're referring to, which puts big gaps in what we're looking at. So make sure you've got everything. And then I sit there with my highlighter and I just highlight all of the key points throughout the document. And I start making notes of what it is that I'm looking at. And then I read it another time just to really feel confident that what I've read, I really truly understand. Super important. So it is something you have to do individually, because when we work on these things, it's generally made up of whether it's a team of 2 people or 100+ people. There are generally more than one person involved, and it is difficult to do a tender in isolation working on your own, and I don't recommend it. You always need somebody to bounce ideas off, feedback off, challenge you on what it is that you're doing. So you've reviewed the documentation and you just need to have a structure within your business, and businesses are different. Every business is different, but there are some similarities. So you just need to have an agreed structure so that when these documents come in, you don't treat everyone differently, because that's just inefficient and I don't know, it's not going to get you the best outcome. Everyone gets annoyed from the very beginning. But go through these documents and as a team challenge the questions. What is it that they're asking and why are they asking you these things? Where has it come from? And I'm sure we've all had these situations where, I mean, it even happens in verbal communication where, depending on your tone, things sound different. Depending on where you put the spacing in the stop in your sentence, it comes across differently. So when people are reading questions, they actually read them completely differently, and that's nobody's fault. It's just an interpretation of the language that's been put forward. So you kind of all have to agree that you know what the question is. It sounds really basic, but it's super, super important. Once you've worked out what they're asking you, it's what other stuff have you got out there? Start looking at what you know about the client. Start looking at things that you know they've had challenges on, things that have been really super difficult for them in the past or, you know, recent. And where have they been looking to expand and grow as an organisation? And that starts to give you a feel for how you might be able to assist them. So in your interpretation, you're also starting to get a feel for how do we help them achieve these things? So you're taking notes and gathering as you go. Big opportunities when they give you objectives. Not always the case, but if they give you some objectives of what it is that they're looking to achieve at the end, it's super helpful, but you need to know what it is that they're trying to get to. What's the end goal? What is it that they ultimately need? Look through the evaluation criteria if they've given it to you. Big help. And what I find is that sometimes it relates directly to what I've been given, and other times I look and go, this evaluation criteria doesn't appear anywhere in this other documentation. So how do I embed this into the questions that have been asked to make sure that I've got it covered? So you've got to find ways of bringing that information over into your main core document. And another big thing is, if you know who the evaluation panel is, do some research, ask within your organisation, peers, etc., who they are, what it is that excites them, what keeps them awake at night, what you think it is that they're looking for, what else can they give you. Some it's that research piece that is, again, it's just super important, because a lot of the information you gather in this phase will start answering those questions that you've just analysed, and you're starting to produce the first draft, and you're doing it as a team, so you're all on the same page. So that is something that is a must. And when you're doing this, it's trying to wear that hat of, it's about you, but it's not about you. It's always about the client and what that client's looking for, and you have to talk to that client. It's not about what, you know, it is, you bring into the table what you're great at, but you've really got to give them what it is that they're looking for. So there's just a couple of things that if you've currently been doing your tenders and you're not doing any of that, you may be missing an opportunity to create better content to answer these questions that will improve the quality of what you're producing to help you to win what you're pitching for. And if it's as simple as doing these couple of things here, why wouldn't you? But make it part of your process so that everything's not completely sporadic and ad hoc and, you know, oh, today is Wednesday, so on Wednesdays we don't, you know, we don't actually look at that stuff. We're going to do those on a Thursday. Whatever it is, make sure you've actually got a process that you're following. So that's all really great, but what makes a winning bid? And there are some key elements, and I've talked to these before and I won't stop talking about them. It's one of the challenges that a lot of people see within organisations, in that you are so embedded in these projects that you're like, we've got this, why would they not choose us? It's like, yep, great. So when you're pitching for an award, or you're pitching for a grant, or you're pitching for a tender, you've got to put forward your best people. They expect that. That to them is like, why would you even be applying if you don't have awesome people? And I expect to see them, and I expect you to explain them and who they are and why they're so amazing. That's just a given. If you're scratching around and you don't have awesome people, you might want to reconsider why you're pitching. You've got to have experience, and it has to be relevant to them. You can draw parallels depending on the industry that you're working in, but you've got to put yourself back in those clients' shoes as to, well, what would the risk be if I can see that they could probably do it, but they've actually never done it before? So what are the additional pieces that you can bring to the table to give them confidence that you really do have that recent and relevant experience? And there's lots of ways that you could go about that. Proof is everything. We can say anything, we can write anything, we can tell a great old story. I work in an industry where we do have the ability to tell a story, but the story's only as good as it being a story if I can't prove that it's real. So it's super essential that you put your proof throughout your documentation, so that they're not questioning whether you can or you can't. They just know you can. It's an obvious, it's doesn't even come into my mind that this is not true. It is, you are who you say you are. You can do what you say you can do. And these people have done it. And you've shown me this through case studies, through testimonials, through statistics, through photographs, a whole range of pieces of information that really, really give me confidence that you know what this is all about. The next thing is having a relationship with that client. And sometimes when we get a tender or a grant, or we're particularly awards, if we've never met these people before, sometimes, you know, this is the way to get the relationship started, that you want to put your best foot forward, you want to get their attention, you've weighed up the odds of winning, you know your competition, but you may actually go, look, the chances of winning are maybe 50%, but it's still worth pitching because we can start that rapport and that relationship with that specific organisation, individual, whoever it should be. And that's great. But the one thing you shouldn't do is ignore elephants in rooms. If you are pitching to a client or organisation that you've had a bad relationship with before, where someone within your, you know, whether it's a team has offended them or the project's gone pear-shaped or whatever that should be, you've got to address those issues. Don't ignore them, however you go about doing it. And there's no one rule here, but sweeping it under the carpet won't get you anywhere. Someone's got to, I guess, put their big girl pants on and work out the best way forward to actually get to that next stage. If you sweep it under the carpet, all your hard work in this process will probably come apart because someone will go, yeah, it looks great, but did you know, da 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 da, and it will diminish everything else that you've got there. So very important. Going back to what I said a little bit earlier about you have to what you're putting forward isn't about you. It's all about the client. It's about how you can be in those clients' shoes. You understand what it is that's keeping them awake at night. You can truly help them to achieve their objectives because it's like you are working in their office and you get them. That's what they're looking for. And if you can't work out how to do that, most of us at some capacity have something come past our desk where we get a quote from somebody or a capability document or a proposal, or even going into a shop and someone's pitching to you and you're like, you ain't got a clue. I'm not who you think I am, or you don't really understand, or you're actually not listening to what I'm saying here. Why are you trying to give me that? I asked for that. Okay, this isn't going well. So make sure you walk a mile in their shoes and truly get to grips with who they are, because your language, the way you pull the documentation together, everything will become consolidated and concise and consistent. So they're very, very key things to do. The next one is not coming up. Ah, there we go. And this is the really big thing, is that you have to have a positive solution and a return on their investment. So everything that we do involves money. You've gone to them, and again, this is a conversation I had not that long ago with a client we were working with on a massive big project, and we had assisted them at EOI stage to be shortlisted, and then at the tender stage they had a team of people, and they were happy to continue that process because we taught them a whole heap of things, and they were happy to continue with that process on their own. To sort of be called in halfway through that process where they were like, we don't know what we're doing, in that we don't know how they're going to pick us because we can't articulate why us. So that positive solution and return on investment is, that's your pitch. Why you? Why would they buy from you? Why would they come to you? Why would they give you money from a grant? Why would you win the award? Why? And if you can't articulate that early on, then everything stems from that. So that I left to the last, but it's the key piece, that if you can't understand why they would come to you, It's not going to come through in whether you're putting together a video, a written document, whatever you're producing. It just kind of becomes a little lackluster, and it's like, oh look, they just look like everybody else. So you want to stand out. So that's the thing. That's where your strategic piece comes in, and we are going to run through that for a whole half hour in another webinar, where how do I come up with strategy? Like, yeah, great, you're saying this, but I don't know how to do it. How do I start? Where do I go? What do I do? So we will spend more time on that, but it's super important. You can't just go with all these other things and think that's going to win the work. Very important, very critical, getting the price right, super important, but you've got to tell them why they need to come to you over your competitors. All right, so what to avoid. Another session that we're going to go through is a bid library. It's so critical, and I am still gobsmacked by the amount of big organisations, small organisations, medium organisations that we walk into, and they're amazing businesses who've done superb work, who are phenomenal at what they do. We can't find anything to show. And in pulling those tenders together, because everyone's been doing everything in every other place, and there is no one place to go to get information. So the things I'm talking about here, I don't want you to think that you can't repurpose stuff. We have to be efficient and effective. We have to tailor to a client, but we also have to be efficient and effective in that. You have to have a bid library set up. So just prefacing this with have a bid library. Compliance is super important. If they've asked you to do things a certain way, if they've asked you to use their document, don't go and put it in your own document. You're going to upset them. They won't read it. It'll be non-compliant. You won't get any further. You have to be respectful of the process and the evaluators. Don't think you can ring them when they've said that you can't. Just don't do it. You will upset somebody and you will be booted out of the process. Boilerplate responses and business as usual is just not, it's not okay. Don't even do it. If you are doing it, it's a little bit offensive. Again, please tell me, I'm sure you've had stuff come past your desk where you're like, this is a rinse and repeat and they don't know who I am. Why am I even reading this? You're actually damaging your brand if you do that. So you can have information that you repurpose, but it has to be tailored to the client. Just don't rinse and repeat. Brochures, I've seen that before, where just ignore all the questions and shove a couple of brochures in and they can work it out. No, they won't. They have a sheet that is a little bit like doing an exam, where they give you marks out of whatever it is that they've pre-allocated, and if they can't find the answer, you get a 0. And guess what? You won't win. Not answering the question, that's always a classic. Not applicable is not an answer. Right, why it's not applicable. Not answering the question by deleting it, yeah, we'll work that out. They'll again go looking for it. Hide and seek is where you change their structure. You've got to follow it. As stupid as their structure might be, you've actually got to follow the way in which they've set up their documentation, because they again will get lost. They won't find your answer. Your answer might be amazing, but they don't know where to go and find it. And page limits, super important that your page limits are adhered to. If they say 15 pages, stick to 15 pages. Not rocket science, but again, we see a lot of it. So what was that all about? What am I actually going to include? And these are just some really simple things, but structure your answers, keep it simple. You don't have to get complicated. We, again, have the privilege of working with clients from different sectors and services and industries where they're amazing at what they do, absolutely amazing, but we can sometimes get too caught up in the technical, and we just sometimes need to simplify that, because the person that you're writing to, some may be technical, some may not be. It might be a whole team of people, and if you lose them, you lose points. Be careful of how much detail and depth, and again, that's part of that upfront process of determining, well, this is going to take up half the document because that's where they want the bulk of the information. Work it out. Proof, as we said earlier, super important. Make your layouts exciting and interesting and clean and clear. Stick to those page limits, be short and succinct, and just make sure you have somebody proofread. This tender I've got due at midday today, I can't read it anymore because I've read it so many times. I need someone else to read it, and it's a tender for us as a business. We're pitching for some work, and I need someone else to look through that because I will have missed things, and that's okay. But have a system in place so that you actually are able to do that. So just a couple of other things, and those again who know me know that I can talk for a really long time, and this has been a different environment obviously to talk today because I would love to ask you all a million questions and see how you're going and what your current issues and concerns are. But I'm really hoping that through any questions that have come through today, we can address those in other webinars that come up, or if there's something quite specific, I'm more than happy to pick up the phone, or you can give me a call. I'm always available. And if I'm not, I will call you or email you and tell you when I can get back to you. But I just think it's really important. These things are critical, particularly at the moment when we're all working remotely, that we can get into a tender and start working on it in isolation, completely independent of any feedback, any input, anything, and suddenly it's starting to go off the rails. Winning is always a team effort, and pitching is always a team effort. So make sure you've got it set up. We've all now got the technology to, doesn't matter where you are, you can work as a team, and it's super important. You know, my business is, we're creatives and we feed off each other, we bounce ideas off each other. So we're having to use this technology to our advantage to ensure that that is maintained and consistent. So use the tools that you're using today, whether it's Zoom or Teams or whatever it is, but you've got to start showing documents, you've got to stick to deadlines, you've got to have drafts, you've got to work together, and you've just got to make sure that everyone is really proud of what you're producing. It may take a little bit longer than it normally does at the moment because there are some technology challenges that we're all facing, but you've got to put your best foot forward and engage with your team. They want to help, but you've got to tell them how to help you. And just finally, never forget that a tender, a grant submission, or an award is a sales document. If that is at the top of what it is that you're doing, then everything will flow from that. If it's just, you think, a bunch of marketing waffle, it will be a bunch of marketing waffle. It is a sales pitch. It is a sales document. You've got to get them excited. You've got to get them, you've got to engage them, and you've got to give them what it is that they are asked for originally. If you haven't listened and you've gone off piste and you're doing your own thing, then of course that's going to cause you some issues. So look, we've come to the end of today's webinar, and I really hope everyone got something out of this today. There are more to come. They're just, as we said, small sound bites that hopefully you can put your headphones on every couple of weeks and just listen in. And my big thing is, if you just sit and think, what's one thing I got out of today that will help to improve the current material that I'm producing? If it's one thing, that's amazing. If it's three things, phenomenal. But I really encourage you to look at what you're currently doing and challenge it, work together as a team. And our thing is just make it happen. It's super important. Thank you everyone for joining today. I wish you all well, stay safe, and look forward to seeing you in a couple of weeks. Thank you so much. Goodbye.